We tend to use the word trauma rather loosely in conversation. You say to people, what was your day? Oh, I had a traumatic time, when all we mean was it was a bad day. I think in general we need to recognise that trauma is a significant psychologically distressing event outside the realms of normal human experience, which causes damage either physically and or emotionally. The issues with refugees, of course, is we're not just talking about one trauma. There's trauma at the point of departure when the crisis happens, war, bombs or whatever. There's trauma as they leave loved ones behind, or they don't know what's happened, or there's the death of loved ones. The journey itself is traumatic, can involve multiple traumas. And then post-arrival, the situation isn't necessarily solved because they think they've reached a point of hope. And actually their situation in the camp may be no better and leave them actually even more depressed. So there's multiple traumas we're dealing with. Signs are pretty much what you'd look for anywhere. Anxiety, flashbacks, feeling very numb, no emotions, physical symptoms, stomach cramps, headaches, all those sort of things. Depression sets in, sometimes suicidal thoughts. I think the first thing for volunteers is to know their own limitations. What we're talking about here really is psychological first aid. Most people don't have mental health professionals on the spot, which would be ideal because we're dealing with serious issues. So I think knowing your own limitations, obviously knowing basic facts about trauma, stress, how it affects people and therefore the sort of behaviour that's being exhibited. They need to know that people need support, friendship, food, rest. I mean, these are people whose worldview has been totally shattered. The world was a safe place. It's now no longer a safe place. So you're dealing with issues of trust, security, fear. Fear as a response to what's happened, but fear for the future because there's uncertainty. Big things about loss. It's not just that you've lost people, you've lost place, you've lost community, you've lost identity. Lots of losses, and what they need probably most is somebody coming alongside, providing a listening ear, support. It's good if you can know who you could refer people onto if you're feeling you're dealing with serious cases, and also meeting their own needs in the midst of meeting all these overwhelming needs. Partly, of course, it all depends on what sort of support and help they've had when they arrive. The sooner support gets in place, the better. It will depend on also their reception, the way they're able to integrate into society. Unfortunately, very often they feel isolated, and even if people are welcome, it's still possible to feel isolated. We've got, of course, all the vivid pictures on television which you can't ignore, and people are seeing Aleppo's being bombed. I know that place. I know the people that live there. So actually that just reactivates the trauma. And with children particularly, I mean, you've got small children that don't know how to verbalise how they're feeling, so usually comes out in behaviour. And how do people recognise age-appropriate reactions in children, and how can they respond to that? In other words, you know, small child, it's regressive behaviour, they're witting, a little bit older, it's irritability. The teens get into rebellious behaviour. And then you actually end up being ostracised by the community that you've come to because you're the difficult child, you're the odd one out. And so actually the people that should be helping you, even the child is actually alienating by the behaviour if it's not understood where that behaviour is coming from. And because the best people to help a child in trauma are parents, but often the parents are so dealing with their own trauma, they don't have the emotional energy or reserves to be able to give the child the security that it feels it needs. I think people the volunteers are often quite monocultural themselves. They know their own culture, and I think they need to realise the cultural aspects regarding these folks. As Westerners, we're very up and open with our feelings and what's happened to us. These are coming from shame honour cultures where you don't say if something's bad's happened to you, because it doesn't just reflect badly on you, it reflects badly on everybody else. There's kind of survival guilt that's, I got away, but about the people that I've left behind. And they're very much group cultures, so they process as groups. And we tend to want to treat people as individuals. What's your trauma? What's your experience? How have you dealt with it? But for many of them, dealing in the group is a more effective way, and often dealing within a gender group. So often it's very much easier for the women to talk about how they felt and what's happened to them if there's just women around, if they've been raped, something really bad's happened. And for the men too, I couldn't protect my family. Well, that's not who a man's supposed to be. But to say that on a one-to-one basis or in the mixed group can be quite difficult. So I think just understanding shame honour cultures and that sort of thing is quite important too. It's not even only those who've been working for years, it's short term. I mean, when you go on an aeroplane, you're always told if the oxygen mask comes down, put it on your face first before you help anybody else. And the most crucial thing for volunteers, those working in these very, very stressful situations, is to know how to care for themselves, because the pressure is so overwhelming that actually you end up with people just totally running out of any reserves, because you're giving every day, 24/7. And so actually training people right from the very beginning, having as a team ethic that actually you need time off. You need 1 day in 7, and you need to do your rota so that people have 1 day in 7. You need to be able to sleep well, eat well, rest well. That seems very selfish when the people that are coming to you have absolutely nothing. But actually, if you burn out in the process, it's the refugees in the end that suffer. So teaching good self-care is really important, and one of the things at Redcliffe College that we've been doing is to put together some really intensive training programs for like 2 days that we're going to be able to take to Europe. One on how do you take care of yourself, what are good principles to avoid burnout and that sort of thing, how to deal with traumatised refugees, and for churches how to understand the situation and work with refugees, with probably something about Islam in that as well. I mean, you can go on to sites like mmct.org, which is the mobile member care team, which has a whole list of symptoms of trauma, how to recognise trauma, how to respond to trauma. The Headington Institute, if you go on there, they've got an online module about dealing with trauma. Interhealth Worldwide have got a paper called Working with Refugees and Asylum Seekers in Europe. So there is some online help that you can receive.